My name's Dr. Kate Lyzenga-Dean, and I'm one of 4 doctors here at DBC. We do these seminars about once a month, and tonight we have a special guest with us. This is Cheryl Blackington. She's going to be co-teaching with me, and we're going to be doing a seminar on mindfulness. So we'll be talking a little bit about what is mindfulness, as well as trying a couple techniques, and we'll be talking about the science of mindfulness too. So Cheryl has an exercise to start us out to help us focus and get ready to learn.
All right, thank you. I am so honored to be here tonight. I've been a patient here for many, many, many years. We were just talking. I remember when Dr. Denbour's clinic was that building over there. I don't know if any of you have been coming here for quite a long time. And then kind of my daughter got raised here, and now she brings the grandkids here. So it's truly been a place for me of health and healing, and no matter where I'm at, they seem to just figure it out and move you along to the next point. So I've been teaching this for quite a few years and practicing mindfulness myself. And I have found that it's changed my life immensely. I've gone from panic attack lady to someone who knows that I have anxiety, but it's usually on the back burner someplace because mindfulness has taught me what I need to do when I'm finding that I'm dealing with some difficulties. So this little short time period here, we're not going to be able to accomplish a lot, but hopefully we'll do some practices. You'll find out a little bit about what mindfulness is. And I'm just curious, has anyone practiced mindfulness before in the audience? All right. Okay. And is anybody here because they're just really curious what mindfulness is? I would imagine. Okay. All right. I know when I first started teaching this, I'm a retired teacher, I was trying to bring it into the schools because I thought it'd be really important for the kids to learn how to do this. And so we couldn't use the word meditation, we had to use the word brain training, which was fine. And I thought, wherever we're all at, we'll do that. And so I just offer that to you. We're going to begin with this little practice to just bring us into the room. I don't know what your day was like today, so we're just going to try to leave behind whatever happened previously and just be here right now in this room. There's nothing you really have to do except just listen to my voice. So we're going to I'll be ringing this bell, and it sounds like this. And your job is to listen to the bell, and when you can't hear it anymore, just to raise your hand. So we'll begin by you sitting up straight with your feet on the floor, hands in lap, resting. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes, or you can just cast your eyes downward if that's more comfortable for you. And just listen to the sound of the bell. And I'll guide you through this. Let's begin. When you can't hear it anymore, you can raise your hand. Beautiful. So when I do this with kids, they're all opening one eye to see if anybody else has raised their hand yet. It's like they don't want to be wrong. So we're going to do this one more time. You know what you're up to now. You're just simply listening to the sound of this bell. And again, we don't have to worry when we raise our hand because, you know, we're going within right now. And the whole point of mindfulness is to go within and notice what you notice. So let's try this again. Close your eyes, same directions. All right, thank you. Beautiful. So raise your hand if you thought that was fairly easy to do, to listen to the bell. All right. That was mindfulness right there. So mindfulness is actually, I'm going to break this down, what's on the screen right now, is the idea that we're trying to pay attention on purpose. And you all just paid attention on purpose to this bell. Now, what you might notice is that you could hear that bell like you hadn't heard it before, perhaps. But you also might have noticed, or I'll bring out to your attention now, that there might have also been some thoughts going on. There might have been thoughts like, I wonder if I can hear it. I wonder if I'm going to raise my hand at the right time. I wonder what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. I wonder what I'm going to do. And then you just go down this thought trail. And so by paying attention on purpose, we still try to, even though our mind might be going along like that, we're still bringing our attention back to the sound of this bell. So that's your job, part of mindfulness, paying attention on purpose. And then we move on a little bit further and we do it with patience. Never done this before, probably. You don't do anything the first time and do it perfectly, or the second, or the third. And so mindfulness teaches us that we do it with patience. We also do it with kindness. What's really common, beginning meditators, even not beginning meditators, is to be sitting there and realize that you don't even know what's been going on for the past who knows how long because your mind's busy going down that rabbit hole that I just got through talking about. So once you notice that, a lot of beginning meditators will go, I did that again, I can't believe I did that. And we kind of beat ourselves up a little bit. But actually, the kindness part comes in when we go, all right, I noticed my mind was thinking. And then you bring your attention back to your breath. So you're paying attention on purpose. You're doing it with patience, perseverance, kindness. And then the last piece of mindfulness is without judgment. And that's a very, very difficult and challenging piece that is a lifetime journey. The more I notice how judgmental I am, the more I notice. So it's just part of our human condition. But in mindfulness of the practice, we just continually bring our attention on purpose back to our breath, and we do it with kindness, patience, and non-judgment. So that, in a nutshell, is what mindfulness is. So I also will tell you that there are some reasons why we do this, and on the next slide we'll tell even more. But some of the big ideas or big takeaways here with mindfulness is, right now we've talked so much in our culture about stress. So when we notice stress, we then have skills and we know what to do with it. My story was when I was going down through this 10, 15 years ago, I had developed this lifetime of anxiety, but I didn't know what it was, and nobody, at least that I went across, any of the doctors or specialists that I went to, nobody could really tell me what was going on other than maybe I should take Lexapro or do something, that way. But they really couldn't help me with what to do about it. And so I came across this mindfulness class, and I learned what to do with it. And in a nutshell, I became aware of what anxiety is, what stress is, and how it expresses itself in many, many different ways. And by knowing this information, by given the knowledge of this information, I developed tools so that I knew what to do. So the big nugget is that we start noticing ourselves a little bit more. We become more of an expert on what's going on within us for real. Not what our crazy mind is thinking all the time, but what's really happening. So that's one reason why we practice this. It also leads to emotional regulation. So many times, especially I work a lot with kids and especially teenagers, and so we all can remember back, or maybe we have kids at that age right now where the natural thing for teenagers is just this roller coaster of emotions, up and down all over the place, and you're just hanging on for dear life as it's whipping you around, really, is what happens. So what we teach is that you can actually become aware of these signals, and then again, we can take steps about what to do about it, so that we know that we're going to have ups and downs. This is not a magic pill. Your life still goes on and things happen. But instead of these big highs and lows, we start having maybe a little bit more of this as you become more practiced at it. And we kind of use the expression that we learn to surf the waves of emotion. So it's very much like that. You're trying to keep your emotional balance or able to regulate what's going on. So instead of maybe feeling anger and just lashing out, which Dr. Kate will talk about why that happens in our brain, instead of just lashing out at someone, we can now create this space. Because we've learned how to breathe, we've learned how to take a pause, we've learned how to assess the situation and determine what needs to be done. Now, this takes a lot of practice to do that, but again, it's just these little tiny baby steps as we go through that. So this creating space between our stressor, and the stressor could be our kids, it could be work, it could be some unexpected event that comes along, and then how are we going to respond to that? We don't have to be just at the whim of it. We don't have to just react to what happens with us. We can actually have some careful, considerate responses that come along with the practice of mindfulness. So we can move forward. So there's just lists and lists of benefits of meditation. This has been a science for over 30 years, and it's well established that with adults, all of these benefits occur. And I know here they talk about bringing mindfulness in, but I know other doctors' offices, it's becoming more mainstream, even in this West Michigan area, where when you go into the doctor and you're complaining about symptoms, they'll go, you might want to try mindfulness. You might want to take a mindfulness class. You might want to do some meditation or really help calm you and help you understand what to do a little bit more. So for me, as I mentioned, I had all this anxiety culminating in panic attacks. I didn't know what was wrong, which made it even worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And then one day my friend said, you know, you might want to consider this class. And I was so like in need of something, I didn't stop to think, oh, why? Am I that big of a mess that you think I ought to go to this class? But I went. Had no idea what it was. It sounded fairly stupid to me, but I did it anyway because I was kind of desperate. And my teacher said, and the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness is where I went, 8-week class, said, you know, you are probably going to forget I said this, but in about 4 weeks, you're going to start noticing some changes in you. And the first 2 weeks, I spent just actively resisting everything. We did the body scan, and I decided that was nap time, and I would just listen to it. And finally, I start realizing, oh, why am I sabotaging myself like this? I'm in a class to learn. Finally, things started kicking in, and I started soaking it up, and sure enough, within 4 weeks, my husband noticed there were some differences going on, and I did as well. So what mindfulness teaches us, there is like a 4-prong approach here. And generally, we spend 8 weeks learning about all of this, so I'm just going to give teeny little bits of an overview here. We start with your physical sensations, because stress lives in the past and in the future. So unfortunately, for adults, we spend about half of our lives in the past or the future. So we miss half of our lives. So like if I'm 60, I've missed 30 of my life, which is really alarming when you think about it. So, so there's stress, past and future. Past is all the things we regret we did, we wish we would have done. Future is, what am I going to do next? I'm going to plan for this. Oh no, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. You know, all this thought that goes on. So mindfulness teaches us to breathe, because here we are in our body right now. So we start noticing our physical sensations. If you are even having, like, to the extent of a panic attack, you will actually, if you have a practice teacher, they will have you start going into your body sensations and start saying, oh, my heart's pounding pretty fast. I'm getting a little sweaty. My stomach's a little bit upset. So you start noticing these warning signals before you have this full-blown panic attack. So you become an expert in your own body's sensations and symptoms and what's going on. And once you've gone on that road into that panic attack, you can get talked down from doing that very practice. So the whole thing is revolved around your body, because this is the body we live in. There's nothing else there available for us until we start time traveling, you know? I mean, this is it right here. So we practice that over and over and over again. And then we go to looking into the thoughts that we might be very unaware of. What are some of those thoughts that we go to in the past? What are the thoughts that we're going to in the future? Very, very often we have the worst negative critic in the world sitting on our shoulder every step of the way, you know, telling you you're an idiot, you're a loser, you don't have any friends, nobody's going to like you. I mean, I tell kids this, and they're like, I didn't know anybody else had those same thoughts. Like, we all have those same thoughts. It's part of being human and being alive. We just have this negative piece that really is a survival piece for us. But we know now that instead of doing that, we can bring in that kindness that mindfulness teaches us. We can start bringing, sitting on our shoulder, yeah, well, you might say I'm a loser over here, but I did the best I could. And so we start replacing that negative self-talk with more positive talk. So we become aware of those thoughts. If we're not aware, we can't do anything about it. And then the thoughts get directly tied into the emotions. And this whole thing, as you've probably noticed, is looping all of the time. Body, thoughts, emotions. Body, thoughts, emotions. And so the emotional regulation I talked about a moment ago, we start needing to become aware of how are we feeling. I will say that within the past years, I did a lot of, 10 years, I've done a lot of work into the emotional part. And sometimes, when I first started, I wasn't even sure what emotion. Here I was an adult, and I wasn't even sure what emotion I was feeling. Because we just are taught pretty much to ignore our feelings, pretend they're not there unless we're happy. And in mindfulness, there is no right or wrong or good or bad emotion. There just is an emotion. Anger is present, joy is present, frustration is present. They're all little pieces of information that can teach us what we need to do and how we can take care of ourselves. So we've got this looping of notice physical sensations, notice the thoughts, notice the emotions, and we kind of tie it all in with this self-compassion. This idea that we're all doing the best we can in any given moment, and we can just give ourselves really some tender words. We can really learn to figure out, well, what do we need? If I'm seething angry right now, what do I need to do? How do I need to take care of myself? And throughout the classes, we teach all of these different types of ways to calm ourselves when we're under pretty strong emotions. And that's usually the brain part Dr. Kate's going to talk about. And then this emotional component are usually these huge pieces that really click for people. Because we all have emotions that we don't know what to do with. And for someone to help us to understand what to do is just a wonderful, wonderful gift.
So, I'd like to step in and talk a little bit about the science behind all of this. One of my pet peeves is when a patient comes to me and lays out this very complicated symptom history and says, yeah, and you know what, my doctor said it's just stress. Ooh, that drives me crazy. Just stress is not a phrase that should be in our biology. Stress is huge, and it's physical. Stress is chemical, right? Stress is neurological. So we have to, when we're talking about mindfulness, we have to recognize that doing these practices is actually changing our body. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the more specifics of that. So mindfulness changes our brain. It helps change our stress or modify our stress response system, and it lowers inflammation. So we're going to talk about how it does some of those things. So I've got a picture here for you of the brain. We've got a couple different large segments of the brain. The big things that we're going to talk about are the amygdala, which is kind of here in the middle. See this guy right here? That's the amygdala. He's so small, but he's so powerful. And you'll understand that in just a second. The hippocampus is connected to the amygdala right here, and it's tucked into the brain. I'm going to show you a little way to remember this in just a second that's kind of useful. But the amygdala and the hippocampus are part of the limbic system. They're part of our deepest understanding of ourselves. They're part of our survival part of our brain. And then you have the prefrontal cortex, which is all of this stuff here on top, the big part, right? That's the part that's more in charge of higher level thinking. It's the CEO. It allows us to be in charge of our thoughts and our decisions. So you've got this survival mechanism down here in that amygdala and hippocampus, and then you've got the, what did you call it, Cheryl? The wise leader, yeah, right? Of the prefrontal cortex. So what happens, and I want to show you this because Cheryl showed me, I thought it was very interesting, is when we are stressed, when we are hit by a trigger, when we are sent into fight or flight, what happens is we flip our lid. Okay, so you just saw that picture of the brain, and we're going to imagine that our little thumb here, you guys can do this with me, our little thumb is the amygdala, okay, so the limbic system, right? And then what we have is we have that prefrontal cortex that covers it. See how it kind of looks like that picture? Can you imagine that? So you've got your wise leader, your CEO here, and then you've got your little amygdala, your survival, fight or flight. So what happens when we get triggered, when our flight or fight, our mechanism in our brain, that amygdala happens, we flip our lid. And we take all of this prefrontal cortex off, and all you've got is the amygdala. And what does the amygdala do? It doesn't think. I'll tell you that right now. It reacts. It fights or it flies. That's the whole point. It keeps us surviving, okay? And we're going to talk about some of the hormones that are involved in that. But so think about you're taking an exam, a really important one, right? And you're sitting there and you can't think of an answer. And so you're getting a little nervous, right? And then I'll skip it. You go to the next one. I don't know the answer to this one either. And what happens is you get afraid, right? You start to think, oh, I'm going to fail this test. This is really bad. And what happens? You flip your lid, and all of that studying that you did, all of the answers that you do know in that prefrontal cortex, they're gone, right? All you've got is panic. But if you could, and Cheryl will show us a way to do this, if you could put that lid back on, right, take that amygdala and control it, help you think through these things, then voila, those answers are there again, right? So it's about helping our brains stay in the right section, to help use the right sections of our brains. And mindfulness does those things. So I thought that was a useful one to understand when you're flipping your lid, right? So you can understand, ooh, that amygdala is showing, right? You gotta cover that guy back up so that you can make good decisions and your brain functions on that higher level that we want it to and that we expect it to do. So that's an interesting part of the brain. Another thing about the brain when it comes to mindfulness is that our brain learns, right? Our brain is constantly changing. It's constantly implementing and putting in new information. And that process is called neuroplasticity or neurogenesis. Neuroplasticity being the ability to mold and shape new ideas and new concepts and new pathways into the brain. Neurogenesis meaning creating new things, right, in the brain. Retraining the brain's highways is a big piece of mindfulness. So you have, and that's really a good image in the brain. You have this pathway that your brain wants to take. If this, then this. And it creates this sort of groove in your brain that gets you from point A to point B. Whether that's, let's say, I'm taking a test, we'll use that example, and that means that I'm going to have anxiety, right? I have a test, which means I'm going to be scared. I have a test, which means I'm going to be anxious. And so your brain creates this pathway from I'm going to have a test to anxiety, right? That becomes more and more grooved, or that pathway becomes larger every time that happens. But if you can somehow reroute using mindfulness to where you're not showing testing and anxiety to be connected, then you can create that new pathway in the brain. And that's what mindfulness does for us. So instead of going brain to anxiety, maybe you're going brain to success, or brain to achievement, or brain to test to confidence, right? That's kind of where that groove will learn to go. So that's one of the things that mindfulness can do, and we can measure this in the brain, which is pretty crazy, to see these pathways being formed in different areas of the brain lighting up in response to mindfulness training. It also straight up increases the brain's density. So all that gray matter in the brain, which represents these brain neurons, they actually increase when you practice mindfulness, which is pretty crazy because in some of the diseases that are the scariest, think dementia and Alzheimer's, we see decrease in brain matter density. So if there's something that you can do now, right, to increase your density, you're preventing something like Alzheimer's from happening just with doing mindfulness techniques, which I think is pretty cool. You also see increased BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is what that word means. What it means is that your brain is able to heal and grow better. So that's a chemical that we can actually measure in the brain, and they've actually done studies showing that pre and post mindfulness training and practice, you increase that factor that allows your brain to heal. Very, very important for traumatic brain injuries, especially in kids. Doing this mindfulness practice will increase that brain-derived neurotrophic factor, allow them to heal. Again, with prevention of dementias and Alzheimer's too, to give your body the ability to increase your neuron density is huge. Mindfulness also increases the left prefrontal cortex, so that's the part where you make good decisions. So it helps basically your brain activity in the good decision making versus not so good reactive decision making. And then as far as neurotransmitters go, it increases serotonin. A lot of people understand serotonin to be kind of that happy hormone in the brain, right? We talk about serotonin in the context of depression a whole lot. and also in melatonin. So if you have trouble sleeping at night, mindfulness can help you sleep by increasing natural melatonin production in the brain. So, you know, mindfulness is great. You can feel the difference, right, in your anxiety, but we can measure the difference in how your brain functions. And I think that's pretty cool, that we can actually show that this stuff is making a measurable scientific change in the body, which I love. Let's talk about the stress response. So the stress response does have to do with that little amygdala guy, right? Fight or flight center of the brain, but it also has to do with a bunch of hormones in our body. The hormone system that we talk about with stress is the HPA axis, the hypothalamus in the brain, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands. A lot of times when I'm talking about this, I skip right to the adrenals because they're kind of the active people in this, or the active player in this, in people. The adrenal glands are what make cortisol and adrenaline, and so those are kind of the end hormones, but you can also have issues if the hypothalamus of the brain isn't working or your pituitary gland isn't working correctly. Basically what happens is, if we get the HPA axis stimulated into that fight or flight, then what can happen is it will stay that way because we are under chronic stress. Our bodies were designed for short-term fight or flight situations. You run away from the bear, you get home to safety, and you don't have stress anymore, right? We're constantly running from the bear in our lives. It's that little stuff, right? It's the constant, oh, my alarm went off and here I go on another day of to-do list. It's, oh, you know, I'm triggered by this family member every Christmas, and then, you know, every time I have to talk with them on the phone. I mean, you can think about lots of examples of little stressors that are just chronic maintained throughout your lifespan. And what that does is it puts you into this cycle where you're constantly creating these stress hormones from your adrenal glands. After a while, long periods of stress, you can actually sort of run out of the ability to make these, and you move from that fight or flight response to just complete and utter exhaustion, where your body can't even build a fight or flight response anymore to a stressor. So I see patients on every end of the spectrum, and it is very much a spectrum. There's no way to like pinpoint where am I as far as my adrenals. It's really hard to measure. There are tests that you can do to sort of give you a snapshot, but most of us can recognize that we have chronic stress. This is a system that we need to take care of, and thankfully mindfulness helps us with that. So one of the main hormones involved in stress response is cortisol. It's that long-term stress hormone that kind of keeps our body chugging. Unfortunately, cortisol does a couple other things that aren't so great. It raises inflammation overall over time. It can depress our immune system. It can leave us with high blood sugar all the time. So we don't really love having cortisol on at all times. It's not really a great thing. We would love it to be sort of moderated by our body and be able to flow up and down as our body needs it, instead of kind of stuck in that on position. The nice thing that mindfulness does is it actually lowers those cortisol levels for us. It upregulates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of fight or flight. So you have fight or flight on one hand, which is the sympathetic nervous system, and rest and digest on the other hand, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. So if we're triggered into that fight or flight, mindfulness can shift us from that fight or flight dominant into rest and digest, which is where we don't often spend much time, right? That's why a lot of times stress or chronic stress can present as digestive issues, because you're never there. Your body is never signaling to break down your food, and so it does it kind of haphazardly, right? We're never getting into that good brain space where we can rest and digest our food, as well as do a bunch of other things like create sex hormones. So this is very linked to infertility, right? If you're in high amounts of stress, your body doesn't procreate well. So that's one of the other things that mindfulness does, is it shifts us out of that stress place into that parasympathetic, rest and digest. And inflammation, I mentioned cortisol is inflammatory over a long period of time. So mindfulness does lower our cholesterol down beautifully. It lowers our oxidative stress. How many of you heard of antioxidants? Right? We know those are good for us, right? Oxidation is the bad thing. It creates problems in our bodies. It creates damage to our genetics. It does a bunch of nasty things. So if we're reducing that oxidative stress, we're better at quenching those irritants and those oxidants in our body. And mindfulness helps with that. It helps us increase endorphins. People know what endorphins are? Nod your head. Endorphins are those good feelings, right, that you get from a lot of different physical activities. They're the runner's high, right, when you're, or the sort of feelings of well-being. Endorphins are the neurotransmitters and hormones that are responsible for that. And they also increase something called telomerase. Your telomeres, okay, stick with me. So you've got your genes, right? You've got genetic codes, and they're in this protein, okay? Sort of. Telomeres are on either end. What happens as we age is those telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter. And it's theorized that that's why aging occurs, right? Physical aging. That's why our bodies wear out, is they get to a place where their telomeres are so short that it starts chunking into their genes, and you can't make new genetics. You can't keep up with production, okay? So new research is if we see shortening of those telomeres, and this telomerase is meant to lengthen those, right, then we're talking anti-aging of the body. So that's how we can measure mindfulness keeping us young, literally helping the anti-aging pieces of our genes to keep growing via that telomerase, which I think is like kind of mind-boggling, really, isn't it? Like at a genetic level, mindfulness is keeping you young. I think that's so cool. And a lot of people, myself included, I'm sure some of you are invested in feeling young. So I think that's a good enough reason right there to practice mindfulness. I found this study, I thought it was kind of interesting, because it has to do with inflammatory bowel disease, which is not something that I would necessarily think of treating with mindfulness. However, they did this study where they took a couple different patient groups, one that did a breath, body, mind workshop, where they did breathing, movement, and meditation, and then others did an educational seminar, okay, for IBD. What they found was significant improvements in anxiety. Nobody's surprised about that, right, with the mindfulness group. Physical symptoms like abdominal pain, well, that's kind of weird. And then quality of life. But the big one that stood out to me was their actual CRP, their inflammatory markers in their blood went down just from doing mindfulness. Nothing else was different in this group than the other group. And it didn't have anything to do with, you know, they weren't treating anxiety, right? They weren't treating depression. They were treating inflammatory bowel disease. So that just shows you the powerful connection of inflammation and that healing process that gets boosted, right, in your body when you practice mindfulness. So I thought that was a really cool study, kind of linking how, okay, as a system, right, we don't just work on mindfulness if we have anxiety. We work on it for overall health, for a bunch of different conditions that it can treat. So I thought that was a cool study. So, do you want to come show us a couple different things? Perfect.
All right, and just to tag a couple other things onto that, the science piece. This is a science, so a lot of times people confuse mindfulness with a religion, and it's not a religion at all. So you can practice any religion that you have and still practice mindfulness because it's literally brain training. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that piece. And then the other piece that's kind of interesting, given that I've spent a lot of my life with teenagers, and I've been interested in the brain piece with teenagers. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the average brain of a person is not fully developed until the ages of 25 to 29 years old. So that prefrontal cortex that she was talking about, that's the piece, that's the last piece. This is the wise leader. So notice how the wise leader, you wonder how teenagers can make such stupid decisions. Well, their wise leader isn't done getting wired yet they have all of the gas available, possible, in order to fuel them ahead. So there's really no let's stop and think of the consequences part of it. It's like, let's just do it, you know, let's go, because that's where their brain is at right there. Another little piece that I also teach mindful parenting, and I mentioned the emotional regulation earlier. A huge part of parenting, as we all know, how many of you are parents or were parents in here? So you know your emotionality just can get swept away in a heartbeat. And so a huge piece of that workshop is just learning, how do I regulate my emotions when my kids are triggering me every time I turn around? And that's another piece that mindfulness really works beautifully with. So let's see what this is all about. I'm going to just teach you an introductory mindfulness. You might be a little tired right now, so you might even feel sleepier when we get done here. I will tell you that when you do deep long in breaths, that wakes your body up. And when you do really long out breaths, that quiets your body down. So you could use that little piece of information depending on how you're feeling right now. So we're going to take a moment then to do something similar at the beginning, which is whenever you practice, you generally sit up straight. So you've just got this energy shooting up your spine. Both feet on the floor, which is your grounding piece. Hands on your lap or whatever's comfortable like that. And then you either close your eyes or you put your eyes down. And again, this is a signal to our body that our brain is in training. And it's one of those repetitive things that our brain and our body learns to respond to. So go ahead and do that and close your eyes, and I will guide you through this. Let's begin with the bell. Breathing in. Nice, big, deep belly breath, filling your belly. Bringing it up into your chest till it almost feels like it will explode. Holding it, and then letting your breath go. And do that again. Breathing in deeply and fully, filling every piece of your belly into your chest. Feeling how good it feels to have that expansion, and then letting it go. And do that again, breathing in deeply, fully, really feeling the parts of your body that are expanding as you breathe in, and then again letting it go. And now you're just going to return your breath to just a normal breathing pattern. No need to control it or to make it any different than what it already is. Just breathe. Breathing in, breathing out. You can even say to yourself, breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. And now bring your attention as you breathe in and out to your feet. Feel your feet resting on the ground, in your shoes. Getting curious, like you've never really noticed your feet before. What kind of sensations are going on there? Temperature, maybe some tingling, maybe some heaviness. There's no right or wrong way to notice. Just notice what your feet feel like right now in your shoes. Allowing them to rest on the earth. Knowing that this is one of the pieces that grounds you as you practice mindfulness. Breathing in, breathing out. And getting curious with your breath. Notice which parts of your body are moving as you breathe. Expanding, contracting, Noticing those physical sensations of your breath. Even the temperature. Is there a difference of when you have an in-breath and the out-breath? If you notice your mind is wandering away, that's all right. That's what minds do. Just gently bring your attention back to your breath as you breathe in and you breathe out. You may even notice some tight areas in your body that need to let go, that need to relax. Meanwhile, you just breathe in and out. And in a moment, I will ring the bell. And this time, you don't need to raise your hand. But when you can't hear the bell any longer, you'll open your eyes and come back into the room. All right, would anyone care to just tell us what you noticed about this experience? What you felt? Yeah.
The clock ticking behind us. And I felt a lot of people, well, I heard a lot of people breathing, because I guess the acoustics in the room was really nice.
Yeah.
But I felt a lot of people breathing, and it kind of like changed the way that I started to breathe, because I don't know, I guess when you do that, we all get in sync. And I felt like a lot of people were trying to get in sync with everyone else's breath.
Interesting. It's really, it's a wonderful experience to do this in a group. You know, often we do it by ourselves, but that's really interesting. Thanks. Anybody else notice sounds in the room you would have never noticed before? We all have a different experience. Anybody else notice anything?
It was easier to take deeper breaths the more time went on. At first it was so tight and constricted and awkward, and then the expansion that happens.
Did anybody notice they were tired?
I became relaxed.
I know, I'll have people say that, and they're like, yep, you were tired. It's not making you tired, you're just noticing that you're tired as well. So there's so many things that you could notice, and we're getting to the point where we need to probably, I have one of two other things I'd like to share with you very quickly. But that's, in essence, the process of meditation, of practicing mindfulness. And there's oodles of ways, there's apps available. I'll tell you at the end about some of the classes that are available for you to practice with. So there's lots of ways, at whatever point you're in, if you want to get started with it, that you can do that. Yes, so we have this, and this will just take a minute. Like I said, I was a middle school teacher. That's what got me into this, besides me and my anxiety. And then, of course, I noticed all the kids and teachers and all of their anxiety. And this is one of the little kids in particular, but teenagers like this too. We use this Hoberman sphere, and it's just another, I just taught you to use your breath as an anchor, a focal point, and also your feet. This is another anchor or focal point for a beginning meditator. So you simply would breathe in and then breathe out. And it kind of shows how your chest, and your diaphragm is opening and closing. And they absolutely go nuts over this. So if you have any kids that are with you, or that grandkids, you can always bring out this little aid. And then there's another one, 5-finger breathing. This is another really, actually adults, kids of all ages like to do this. It's very portable because we have a hand and we have a finger. So basically, you take your pointer finger and bring your hand up. So you can go ahead and give this a try. And you simply just trace your finger up your thumb as you breathe in, and then down your thumb as you breathe out. And then in and out. And the idea is to notice your breath, but also to notice this physical sensation of this feeling of tracing of your fingers. So you not only have a focal point of your breath, but you also have a focal point of the physicality of it all, so it grounds you. And kids that I work with that have test anxiety, for instance, they've just gone down during that amygdala area there. They will do this breathing for maybe, I don't know, as long as they need to, but certainly a few minutes. And it calms the amygdala down, and they are back in focus again. What happens is that when your amygdala activates, your hippocampus, the memory piece, and your wise leader all kind of flip their lid and they become disconnected. So our idea in mindfulness is to reintegrate the brain. So it's all together again, and we have all the parts available. And so once it's reintegrated again, then the memory comes back. You know, you're all set to go with that test, if you've studied. Here is that. Should I talk about the stuff, or do you want to do questions first, like the handouts or anything?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to forget this. So yeah, I am now affiliated with the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness. I don't know if any of you have heard of that before, but we offer adult classes. As I mentioned, there's the gold standard 8-week class, which we do mindful stress reduction. They also have the 8-week mindful self-compassion. They're both awesome. And now they've started adding just maybe 2 or 3 hour workshops for those who don't have the time to commit to 8 weeks. So there's that. We have every year we bring in 2 speakers that are national level, and this Friday we have Oren Sofer, who will be doing mindful communication, and he's just amazing. I've taken his online class quite a few times. I could probably keep taking it. Then I work with kids, so I have elementary, middle, high school. I teach mindful parenting, and then we also do a couple times a year family mindfulness at Meyer Gardens. So I think fall is when the next one's going to be coming up. So there's all kinds of handouts on your way out there that you're welcome to take whatever you'd like. Okay.
Good. We have time if we want to take a couple questions. I don't if directed towards either of us. If anybody has a question, raise your hand. Yeah.
Excuse me, I wonder if you could just tell me briefly what is the difference between the mindfulness-based stress reduction and the mindful self-compassion courses?
Yeah, okay, good question. So what we just talked about was in essence the mindful-based stress reduction. It will go through how to meditate, how to practice mindfulness. It's not just the meditation either, by the way. There's a lot of other ways. We can be mindful in anything that we do. Mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful communication. So there's the essence of that. So it will go into the thoughts, the emotions, the behaviors, and then all of the skills that you can learn, and each week is devoted to one of those major topics. Mindful self-compassion, which is my newest favorite thing, I teach that with teenagers as well, is this idea that we can learn to be aware in a mindful way, but that we really need to take the time to take care of ourselves and take care of our hearts and make sure that we replace this negative self-talk with more positive, upbeat, loving, and that once you start practicing it for yourself, it just kind of emanates to all of your loved ones, and it's like a pebble, you know, dropped in the pond, and it just spreads from there. So does that give you enough to get a difference on it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Which of those programs would be most beneficial to balance your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system?
Wow, they both would be. It depends which one is most interesting to you as far as entry level. To me, it was the stress reduction part that I was most attracted to, but that's because I didn't understand what mindful self-compassion was either, honestly. So I guess it's what's interesting to all of you, that where would you like to start? Because you're not going to get the same in-depth mindfulness-based stuff in the mindful self-compassion class. That's going to be more heart-oriented, more calming, I guess. if that helps. So I would say go with whatever piques your interest. And if you're not sure, you can always take, we have 2 or 3 hour introductory workshops in both. You could kind of, see what it's like, and then go with the 8 weeks on whichever one that is most appealing to you.
How would you work with someone who's had a traumatic brain injury?
Yeah, so that is challenging. That's lots and lots of repetition, and it depends on the type of brain injury and which part of the brain has been injured. I've worked with some of the kids from, what's the school over there by Burton and Breton? Severe learning disabilities. Say that? No. But I think Kennesaw used to be about right there. It'll come back to me. At any rate, what I've noticed with them is that I have to go slow, I have to repeat a lot, and just do that over and over and over again. And for them too, using apps on a daily basis, like Calm is one, Headspace is one, Insight Meditation is my all-time favorite one. And I can tell you more about that afterwards if you'd like me to tell you more about that. But definitely not just for them, but also for anybody. Those apps are great. I should say too, what was the thought I just had about that? Oh, you also have to be careful if anybody is actually in a trauma-based situation, just not the brain injury, but has had a traumatic background. And the way you approach them is much different than, let's say, somebody who hasn't. Mm-hmm.
Just curious, you spoke about apps. How does apps and then the people that you hang around every day influence the way that you can actually go about doing these exercises and whatnot?
That's such a good question. I've noticed with my journey that I've actually have different friends. I noticed that my health and well-being I've just, it's like peeling away the layers of an onion, little by little by little, you peel away a lot of that stuff that you've been carrying around your whole life, and you notice that maybe the types of friends that you want to be around aren't the same friends that you were with. I mean, I still have a lot of those friends, but I'm saying my inner circle has changed a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah.
I'd just like to say that, just for people who might be interested, I did take the mindfulness-based stress reduction class a few years ago. And I went in there with a totally racing brain, so much so that it was hard for me to even, say a coherent sentence. And by the end of is it 6 weeks?
8 weeks.
8 weeks, okay. I would come in and I would have a hard time hearing my instructor's voice and not wanting to just immediately fall asleep. I mean, the difference in my anxiety level was just tremendous.
Yeah.
So if anyone's interested, all I can say is for me, it was really great. So.
Yeah, it was life-changing for me and so many people that I know. You just, you learn how to handle your life in a much more manageable, much more pleasant way. You feel a lot happier because you don't have all this stuff that you're dragging around and worrying about all the time.
Well, and that part didn't happen immediately. That part I sort of noticed as I went on afterwards, starting to become more incorporated into my life and my responses day to day.
Yeah, so that's a good point, because you just don't stop. You just kind of continue on your journey that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you say those apps again?
Yeah, Headspace, and that was developed for teenagers, but I have a lot of adult friends who listen to that. Part of it's free, and then you have to pay. Calm is another one that probably is more developed for kids and teenagers. And then Insight Meditation is just my go-to standard app. It's got thousands and thousands and thousands of guided meditations on it, or just a timer. And then I will say that I love 10% Happier. If anybody has come across that, there's a free podcast, but you can also pay for a subscription, and you've got basically all of the world's best teachers, right there on that app. It's 10% Happier.
I'll try to make sure that information finds its way onto our Facebook page, so that those of you who follow us on Facebook can get that.
Yeah, and I should say that I have my website, Teens Just Breathe, and my email information, all that's back there too, and all of that. Lots of information is on my website as well.
I'm just wondering what the difference between the mindfulness and regular meditation.
Yeah, okay, so mindfulness is maybe a more modern day holistic look at how we're approaching this, because as I mentioned, you can meditate, which means you sit still, you notice your breath, and that's the standard way to do that. Mindfulness is this idea that we can bring about throughout our entire life if we remember it. We can learn to be mindful. We can learn to take a breath. We can learn to pause. We can learn to not just get in, if we notice our amygdala is activated, which we adults spend 50% of our life with that activated as well. So a lot of times we're not even aware that it's activated. So we can start noticing this, which gives us the information about what to do. So it's a holistic, encompassing way of relating to your life and the people in your life. And
so meditation may be a part of mindfulness practice?
Yes.
Makes sense.
What would be an ideal amount of time to spend on a day for meditation/mindfulness?
Yeah, that's a good question. I spend about 20 minutes a day, and even when I don't want to, and it's amazing. You're just sitting there for 20 minutes, and my mind, the first 5 minutes, it's like, I don't really want to sit here. I'd really rather go up and have some coffee. And all this stuff goes on in your mind, like you try to rationalize away whatever's good for you. Like you want that really nice, sweet piece of whatever. It's like, oh, I think I'll just have that right now. So it's that mind stuff. So about 20 minutes is what I do. The research is showing that, and I know when I took that class, it was about 8-9 years ago, we were supposed to spend 45 minutes a day, which just about killed me to do that. I don't know what they're saying now, because the research is now showing that really you can even you can change your brain as little as 10 minutes a day. So the idea though is that you have to do it every day. You have to make a practice of it. If you're building brain muscle, just like if you're lifting weights, you're building your muscle. That no changes will happen if you just wait until you're in crisis mode. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to try that. That's not going to work.
Got to build those highways in the brain.
Yeah.
With all of our lives, well, the world in general moving so fast, in all of our lives, we have to pay attention to stuff every single day. And what are useful and practical ways to practice mindfulness while we're still going through our everyday lives and having to deal with stuff that's on the front of our head right now? And sometimes people just don't have the time to practice that. What's a useful way or a practical way to practice that while you're going about your everyday life?
You have good questions. All right, I'm glad you said that. That's another piece. We call them mindful moments. So if you think of some activity that you do a lot throughout the day, like washing your hands, for instance, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, taking out the trash, washing the dishes, rather than do it mindlessly or on autopilot, do it mindfully. So if you're going to wash your hands, really wash your hands. What are the sensations? What does that feel like? You go really slow. Notice the temperature of the water. Notice what the soap suds feel like. Breathe as you're doing it. Take your time. Slow it down. Or whatever activity you choose. I don't know if you all can relate, but you could be in the shower and you might have washed your hair, or maybe you didn't wash your hair. You're not really sure if you washed your hair because you weren't paying attention to what you were doing. So you could make it a habit to, if you're going to wash your hair, why not enjoy that, for those of us who have hair, you're just going to really get in there and do it. So mindful moments is a great way. And when I do the parenting, a lot of parents they literally don't have time especially if you have little kids, to do that. And so that's what we say. Go in the bathroom, lock the door, wash your hands, and have privacy for 2 minutes. And that little bits and pieces throughout the day will amount to that 10 minutes.
Sometimes I'll tell my patients, every time you get a text, before you answer the text or before you look at it, take one full breath in and one full breath out. Right? I mean, think about how many times you're looking at your phone or answering your phone. It changes how you respond to whatever you see on that too, right? If you've taken a deep breath in and out, you're going to respond differently to whatever's happening.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do.
And it happens a lot more than taking a shower. For most people.
We hope.
Yeah.
Is that app that you're that one when you said insight meditation, is it actually called insight timer?
Yes, it is.
Is it a little bowl?
It is,
Symbol?
yes.
Okay.
That's it.
Just making sure.
Yep, thanks. And that one's free.
So I want to encourage everybody, check out some of the information that Cheryl has. Let's thank her for being here with us tonight. Thank you. And thank you all for being here with us. It's a lot more fun for us when people come. So we appreciate your time, and I hope you learned something new tonight.